So in today's video, we're going to be updating Webflow CMS items from inside of Airtable without using Zapier, Integromat, or any third-party automation tool. Let's get into it. Hey friends, welcome back to the second episode of this brand new series where I am going to teach you how you can use Airtable to control your Webflow CMS. So in the first episode, I showed you how you can use buttons and webhooks inside of Airtable to trigger workflows in tools like Integromat or Zapier to update Webflow CMS items. Now in today's video, we're going to be doing something similar. We're going to be working on updating CMS items, but instead of having to use third-party automation tools, we're going to be using Airtable Scripts. Now obviously the biggest perk of using something like Airtable Scripts is that you don't actually have to pay for any other automation tool, which means you could save around $30 to $40 a month. The downside of using Scripts for people who are just getting into it is that Scripts is a little bit more complicated because you're actually dealing with code. But do not worry, I am going to provide you the code snippet that you're going to need in order to update your Webflow CMS items using Airtable Scripts. So I will leave a link in the description down below where you can head over to my website and I will send you that script by email, or I'll make it downloadable. So all you're going to need to do once you have that code is just copy and paste it into your script editor and then follow along the different steps that I take in order to modify that code to fit my Airtable base and my Webflow collection. Now before I get into it, I want to make a quick little shout out to Aaron from Automate All the Things. He has been helping me out a lot with all of these scripts, and we are working on some more that we can put on this YouTube channel in the future. So if you haven't already, jump over to his channel, subscribe to it. Also check out the Airtable YouTube channel that he has recently started a stream on. It is fantastic. But with that being said, let's get into the tutorial. So in this workflow here, we are going to be pretty much setting up the same thing that we did in the first episode, where we click a button inside of our Airtable base and then that automatically updates a record inside of Webflow. Now in order for us to get started with Airtable Scripts, we're going to have to jump in here and we're going to have to create a new field type, which is a button field. So I'm just going to call this here update Webflow, and I am then going to search for the field type, which is a button. Now from here, again, just give your button a label. I'm going to call this update Webflow. And then the first step where it's different from sending a webhook is when we change the action from open URL to run script. So once that is done, you'll see an app opening in the background, and you can then jump in here and you can select one of your dashboards. Now if you haven't used any apps before, this will be empty. I have created a separate view just for all of my scripts, so I'm going to select that one there. The next thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to click on the install button. Now if you already have a script written for this, you'll be able to select it from the drop down option. But in my case, I don't have anything yet, so I'm just going to click on install. Now from here, pretty straightforward, just click on add app and then click on create field. Now you'll see on the right side that a little window has opened up with the scripting app. What we're going to do now is we're just going to make it full screen, and then I'm going to click on get started. So we can start from scratch, and you'll see that there's already some code that is in the code editor, and all you're going to need to do to get started is to delete this. Now don't worry about actually writing the code. I'm actually going to provide you the code snippet that you're going to need in order to update Webflow CMS items. So just head on over to my website and I will send you the code by email, and then you can just copy and paste it straight from your email into this particular code editor. So once you've copy and pasted over the code, you'll be looking at something like this here. And what we're gonna need to do now is make some modifications to fit your table and your Webflow CMS fields. So let's get started at the top. So in this first field, what we're doing is we're defining a variable called table, and then we are telling Airtable what table we're gonna be working with. So you'll see that it says location here because that's what I am using inside of my other project. But what I'm going to change this to is city, because that is the name of the table that will contain the records that I want to update. So the next thing that the script does is it basically allows us to select a certain record. So when we click this button here, what we want the script to do is to only update this particular record inside of Webflow, which is what that particular part of the code does. This here again allows you to select the record inside of the city table. The next thing that we're going to have to do is down the track, we're going to be updating the Webflow CMS collection or the CMS item. And in order to do that, we're going to need to have the Webflow item ID so that we can tell the Webflow API what exactly we want to update. So in order for you to make this work, you're actually going to have your Webflow item ID stored inside of Webflow. And you can see here that I have a column called Webflow Item ID that contains all of the Webflow Item IDs of the published items. Now, in order for you to make this work, you are going to have something in there, otherwise an error message will come up. You can see that I've got a whole bunch of records here that are still in my backlog. Now, if I click this button here, it would simply not work because we wouldn't be specifying what record inside of Webflow we want to update. So just be sure to have your Webflow item IDs stored inside of your Airtable table. So once we have done all of this, we have basically specified to Airtable what record we want to work with. We have gotten the Webflow item ID, and now what we want to do is move into the next step where we go and update that particular record inside of Webflow. So you can see here that we have an API call, and for anyone new to APIs, basically what this means is we are notifying the Webflow database that we want to make a change to a specific record in a specific collection. So what we're doing here is we are putting in the URL that basically allows us to tell Webflow what record and what collection we want to change. And the first thing that you're going to need to change is this value here. Now this here is the collection ID for the collection item that you want to update. So if I jump into my Webflow project and I jump into my CMS, I'll be able to see all of my different collections, and the one that I want to update is the cities collection. And if you just click on the settings cog and you go to the top, you'll see that it says collection ID up here. Now all you're going to need to do is just copy this and then replace it right here. And then you've got /items, and now what you want to do is you want to specify the item ID. Now obviously you don't just want to type in an item ID in the same way that we did with the collection ID, because every single time you click that button it will be different. So what we want to do is we want to put in a dynamic value or a variable, and we have already defined that variable in a previous step when we state that we want to get the Webflow item ID of the record that we selected in the previous step. So whenever we now make that call to Webflow, what will happen is Airtable will have a look and say, okay, first of all, what record was selected, which is this part here. Then the next thing is, what is the Webflow item ID for that particular record? And again, I actually forgot that I need to update this to be item ID, because that is what it's called inside of my table, I believe. Just let me double check. Yep, it says Webflow item ID. And now that we have the Webflow item ID, we want to add that in here. And so really this city ID is the variable, and it is defined as the Webflow item ID of the record that we have selected. So now that we have done that, now what we need to do is we need to specify what fields for this particular item we want to update. So you can see I already have a bunch of variables pre-filled. Now what I'll need you to do is to remove it, and then we're going to head back over to the Webflow CMS, and we're going to have a look at the different fields that we have. Now in order to keep things super simple, we're just going to be updating two fields today, and the first field is going to be the page title, and the next field is going to be the page description. Now in a future video we're going to dive into different field types like reference fields, dates, images, all those types of things, but for now, just to keep things super simple, we're going to focus only on the title and the description. So what we're going to do is we are going to go back to Airtable, and we are now going to add the variables that are sitting inside of the Webflow collection. So we're going to type in, first of all, page title, and then we are going to close this off, and we're going to add the variable in a second. And then we are also going to add one for page description, and then again, same thing. So now what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to tell Webflow what value we want them to put into the page title field and the page description field. Now, we already have this information stored inside of Airtable under Webflow title and Webflow description. So what we're gonna need to do now is to just specify that in the code. So the way that you do that is, first of all, you specify what record we're working with, and the way that we do that is through the variable that we defined when we click the button. So we're just gonna type in record, and now what we wanna do is, just like in that step when we looked for the Webflow item ID, we want to get the cell value, so we're gonna type in get cell value for the title, and I have called that particular field Webflow title. So I'm just gonna go and select that. Perfect, job done. The next thing that we wanna do here is we also wanna do the same thing for the Webflow description. So again, we're gonna open it up, and you'll see that the values that are available to you will automatically pop up. So now that we have specified what particular fields inside of the collection we want to update, we are pretty much good to go. Now, there's one other thing that you're gonna have to do. You are going to have to add your API key. Now, the way that you're gonna get your API key is by jumping into the project settings, heading over to the integrations tab, and then when you scroll down to this section that says API access, you can just click on generate new API token, and then all you need to do is copy and paste the value that you get into here. And once that is done, you'll be able to test it and run your workflow. Now, there's one last little thing that we want to do, and that is we want to know whether or not the actual script ran successfully. So the thing that I like to do is I like to jump in here and I just add a new field, which is a checkbox field, and I am going to call this script update. I'm going to create it, and basically what happens is when we click that button and it updates inside of Webflow successfully, what I want it to do is just add a little tick box here. And so that is what this step down here does. Now, if you don't call it script update, you can call it whatever you want, but just make sure to change the name of the variable in here. Okay, and so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna paste in my API key and then I'm gonna run it, but I can't show you my API key, so I am just gonna meet you back in my Airtable base once it's all set up. Okay, so now that we're back in here, I just ran a little test and it all worked okay, so I just want to show you what happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to head back to the designer so we can have a little before and after look at our CMS. And what we're going to do is we're going to head to our cities collection, or whatever it is that you're working with. We're going to click on this little pin in the top right corner, and we're going to select page title and page description. Now you can see that I have already got a few locations published, but some of the locations don't have a page title yet and they don't have a page description. So I'm going to update the page title and page description for Kingston. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into my database, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate my way down to Kingston, and you can see I have my Webflow item ID, I have everything ready, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on update Webflow. So what's going to happen now is the script's going to run, and you can already see that it successfully ran, because when you run a console log, which is basically to see what the script read, you can see that it successfully updated the values that sit inside of Webflow. But we're going to check it by actually jumping in here and now refreshing the screen. And now when we navigate our way back to cities and we click on the page title and page description, you can now see that these fields have been populated for this particular CMS item. And you can also see that a checkmark has been added to the script update section, which means we know now that whenever we click on the update Webflow button, whatever we have stored inside of the fields for the page title and the page description, it will automatically be sent to Webflow. And so just like that, you've learned how you can use Airtable Scripts to update Webflow CMS items by just clicking a button inside of Airtable. Now, I just wanted to say again, thanks to Aaron for helping set this script up. Aaron and I are working on a whole bunch of additional scripts, so keep an eye out on this channel, keep an eye out on his channel as well. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a quick little like on this video. And one other thing that I'd like to know before you go is, now that you have seen the option where you can use a button and webhook look to automate this workflow, but also now using scripts without any third-party automation tool, what option do you think you are more likely to pick? Which one do you prefer? So let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around for this video, and I'll see you back here for the next one.